The sky burned as the Galactic Empire descended upon Earth. Monolithic warships hovered in silence, their metallic hulls reflecting the dying sun. A single broadcast echoed across the world, spoken in a voice that carried the weight of 1,000 conquered civilizations. Surrender. Your resistance is meaningless. Your weapons are obsolete. Your species is finished. They weren't wrong. Humanity fought, but against a force that had conquered entire star systems. What chance did they have? The first orbital strikes turned military bases into craters. Energy shields neutralized every missile before it could reach its target. Plasma artillery melted through tanks like butter. The Empire's troops landed in waves, tall, armored beings who moved with the efficiency of a machine. They didn't rush. They didn't fear. They advanced with the confidence of conquerors, knowing no force on this backwater planet could stop them. Earth fell in days. Governments collapsed. The lucky ones died in the first strikes. The survivors scattered, hunted like vermin. To the Empire, humanity wasn't even a worthy adversary. Just another primitive race that refused to accept its fate. Among the survivors, hidden deep in the mountains, a small group refused to surrender. Captain Elias Carter sat in the ruins of an abandoned bunker, watching the smoke rise from what was once a city. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with something else. Defiance. They had called his weapons obsolete. Said his kind was finished? He wasn't ready to agree. His team was barely more than a dozen now, former soldiers, scavengers, survivors. Armed with whatever scraps they could find, they hid in the wilderness, striking at small supply lines, delaying the inevitable. It wasn't enough. Their energy weapons barely scratched Imperial armor. Bullets bounced off their shields. Every engagement cost more lives. The Empire wasn't even taking them seriously anymore. That was their mistake. Deep in an underground vault, hidden beneath layers of dust and time, Carter's team made a discovery. Not alien technology. Not some lost human superweapon. No. It was something far older. Crates stacked in rusted rows, filled with relics of a past era. Heavy steel barrels. Oiled mechanisms. Ammunition belts thick as a man's arm. A weapon long forgotten. A name that once echoed across battlefields and tore through flesh like a storm of iron. A Gatling gun. At first they laughed. An old-world rotary cannon? Against an intergalactic empire? The thought was absurd. Carter didn't laugh. He ran a hand over the cold steel, feeling the weight of history in his grip. The Empire had adapted to energy warfare. Their shields, their armor, their tactics, all designed to counter plasma, lasers, and directed energy weapons. But this was something they had never prepared for. The rebels lifted the weapon onto an old transport, hauling it back to camp. The next few days were spent in feverish work, cleaning, repairing, loading the first belt of ammunition. When Carter pulled the trigger for the first time, the mountains roared. The barrels spun, a blur of motion, spewing a hailstorm of lead into the valley. The sound was deafening. The trees shuddered. Rocks exploded into dust. Unlike their modern rifles, this weapon did not fire in bursts. It did not overheat. It did not falter. It unleashed hell. And Carter knew, if it could do this to rock and earth, it would do far worse to Imperial flesh. The Empire had declared humanity finished. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The rebels had no time for hesitation. The Empire believed Earth was pacified, its last defenders nothing more than scattered remnants clinging to a lost cause. That arrogance would be their downfall. Carter's team moved quickly. They chose their target, a lightly guarded Imperial patrol route cutting through the mountains. The Empire had stopped deploying heavy forces, convinced there was no threat worth the effort. That, too, was a mistake. They positioned the Gatling gun on a ridge overlooking the pass. A single road twisted through the valley, perfect for an ambush. They had no energy weapons, no guided missiles. Just steel, lead, and a weapon from a forgotten war. The patrol arrived as expected, hovercrafts drifting lazily, troops in shining armor marching with the confidence of an unbeatable force. They didn't take cover. They didn't check the cliffs. They didn't need to. Until the world erupted. The first explosion sent rock and dust cascading down the slopes, blocking the convoy's retreat. The rebels fired their rifles, drawing the Empire's attention. Plasma bolts screamed through the air, forcing the humans into cover. Then, Carter pulled the trigger. The Gatling gun roared to life, spinning barrels vomiting fire and metal. The sheer volume of bullets ripped through the air like an unstoppable force. Imperial armor, designed for energy resistance, crumpled under the kinetic onslaught. Shields flickered then failed. The first line of troops collapsed, their bodies torn apart before they could even react. Panic set in. The Empire had never faced anything like this. Their warriors were disciplined, their technology advanced, but nothing in their doctrine accounted for a weapon that didn't rely on energy, that ignored shields entirely, that simply shredded through anything in its path. Hovercrafts veered wildly as their pilots fell. Soldiers tried to return fire, but every attempt was met with another storm of bullets. Within seconds, the once mighty Imperial patrol was nothing more than wreckage and corpses. Carter lifted his gaze, surveying the destruction. His team exchanged looks: shock, exhilaration, realization. They had done it. They had proven the Empire was not invincible. The old weapons still had power. And this was only the beginning. The survivors didn't flee. They didn't retreat into the shadows like before. This time, they left a message. The wreckage of the Imperial patrol was left untouched, bodies strewn across the pass, the shattered remains of hovercrafts smoldering under the open sky. A warning. For the first time, the Empire took notice. The reports came in. Humans had engaged Imperial forces and won. The officers scoffed at first. Primitive weapons? Impossible. The numbers had to be wrong. Then came the footage. A single weapon, older than the Empire itself, had annihilated an entire unit. Their armor was useless. Their shields irrelevant. Their doctrine shattered. Panic rippled through the ranks. The Empire had spent centuries perfecting energy warfare. They had countermeasures for plasma cannons, frequency disruptors, antimatter strikes. But against a storm of high-velocity lead? They had nothing. They deployed more troops, better units, advanced shielding. None of it mattered. The rebels struck again, and again, and again. Each time, the result was the same. The Gatling gun turned battlefield superiority into a myth. Word spread. Humanity was supposed to be broken, scattered, finished. Instead, whispers of defiance grew. Outposts fell silent. Supply lines were hit. Entire battalions disappeared into the wilderness, only to be found days later, ripped apart by something they couldn't understand. The Empire began to fear the unseen enemy. A force that didn't fight with honor, with strategy, with logic. It fought with rage. With weapons forged from an era when war was simple: kill or be killed. And for the first time, the Empire hesitated. The Empire's hesitation didn't last. Fear turned to anger, and anger turned to action. They would not be humiliated by a species they had already declared extinct. A full-scale invasion force was mobilized, a planetary purge ordered. No more patrols, no more small skirmishes. This time, they would bring overwhelming force. But the rebels were no longer a handful of desperate survivors. Carter's victory had ignited something far greater than resistance. Factories hidden beneath ruins roared to life. Engineers, machinists, and scavengers worked tirelessly, restoring long-forgotten weapons. The Gatling gun was no longer a relic. It was a blueprint for revolution. Mass production began. Bullets, once thought obsolete, became the most valuable resource on the planet. In hidden camps, soldiers trained not with energy weapons, but with the instruments of old-world warfare. Rifles, machine guns, cannons, tools once deemed useless in a galaxy of energy shields, were now humanity's greatest weapons. The Empire descended, ready to burn the last remnants of defiance. But they found something waiting for them. Not scattered insurgents, not desperate survivors. Lines of human soldiers, entrenched and ready. The roar of machine guns drowned out the Empire's war cries. Bullets ripped through their formations before they even reached the battlefield. The shields that had once made them untouchable flickered and fell. Their warships, hovering in false security, were torn apart from below, old-world artillery blasting through hulls designed only for energy resistance. The battlefield became a slaughter, and this time, it wasn't humanity that fell. It was the Empire. Victory was never about superior technology. It was about understanding war. And no species in the galaxy understood war better than humanity.